important. So we really want to have that priority in that approach, provide guidance and support, and refine the business models. Finally, we want to facilitate the networking. So please engage the speakers, participate in the discussions, make questions either on chat or live. Please be an active member of this event, because it's very important for us that you are understanding and getting the best of all this knowledge. Thank you very much. Have a very nice event, and I'll be here if you need anything from me. Up to you, Antonio. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Just a second. Let me just. All right. So, Juan, thank you again. We are now going to start our talks. The first talk is going to be with Björn Andersson, founder and CEO of Advenue People. Björn is going to talk about how to build and optimize your organization during a recession. Björn, thank you for coming, and thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Please.
Yes, thanks for having me. So I prepared a couple of 100 slides. I will go through. No, it's not that bad. But let me just do like this and like this. Just 1 second. Cool. All right. Like that. And I can share my screen. I don't think I can share my screen here. Is that possible? Or
Antonio needs to give you permission, maybe.
Yeah, just I'm going to share the screen with you. All right. I think it's now on. Can you check, please?
Yes, that is on. Beautiful. All right. All right. All right. All right. Cool. All right. So, so as it says, we're the startup recruiter. I'll give you just a very brief intro to us and what we do, and to myself. So basically, we've been working with startups, scale-ups, VCs, and corporate startups since 2012, mostly in Europe, but also in the US. We had talent for engineering, product sales, marketing, operations. We do that on all levels. That could be anything from a developer to a CEO. I am an angel investor myself. I was an early investor in Pecan, which you may be familiar with, exited to Workday a couple of years ago. I'm an LP in a fund, French funds, Emblem, a new fund from 2023, and also an investor in a couple of smaller startups at an early stage, one being Settlements, which is smart crypto payments. I may give you a couple of examples of why that is a great idea in the current markets a bit later. So I'm going to say something today about how to build and optimize your organization during a recession. Headlines would be market trends, what's happening in the market currently. What are we seeing? Something around how to build a startup scale up from a recruitment perspective. Also in terms of kind of current market trends, I'm going to say something around how to survive a recession. That sounds a bit harsh, a bit bleak. It's not that bad, but nonetheless. And then something about how to choose the right investors for your startup. I don't know if anyone of you knows Suora. It's a US scale-up that do payments, recurring payments for B2B SaaS companies. And they created one of the greatest pitch decks of all times, if you ask me, and called it Shift Happens, because they saw a shift happening, which they call the subscription economy. So this is not about the subscription economy, but it's more about the shifts that we're seeing currently in the market. So we're seeing a bit of a shift, and I think we can call it a seismic shift as well. So the trends that we're seeing across Europe, with clients, people we speak to, expectations of investors, what we're doing ourselves as a company, we are going from more staff to fewer staff, but more senior staff. So what that means is that last year, for example, we hired a lot of mid-level developers, also, very good developers, but still, mid-level developers. And we do very, very little of that this year, we hired very, very senior developers, and some of our clients, even very small startups, they would choose, instead of hiring 3 or 4 mid-level developers and perhaps pay them 80k euros, now they hire 1 or 2 very, very senior developers and pay them perhaps 110 or 120. So we do see kind of a trend currently towards fewer staff but more senior staff. And then from manual processes to more automation. And the easy thing here would be to say, hey, ChatGPT gonna solve all our problems, and that's the only thing we need. For us, it's more about tooling, basically. So we're more looking into a situation where if we are to save on cost, then we need to look at tooling. Yes, sometimes that is ChatGPT. It's a great tool, but it's also about automating processes. We have a client that has a B2B SaaS platform for marketing attribution. One of their account execs recently, who we hired, had a discussion with the clients, and the client's CMO, because they sell to marketing organizations, said, hey, we just had to let 10 people go from the team. And the account exec thought, oh, that's not going to happen. But she got a call the next day, and the deal went through, because as the client said, hey, we saved money, and some of those savings we can allocate to your platform. I mentioned settlement before. It's smart crypto payments. You can do kind of a workflow where you attach it to something like Contract Book, which is a tool, a platform for handling all sorts of contracts. And you can do kind of an automated chain of events. So when someone signs a contract, you get direct payments with euros basically into your accounts, and it takes 8 seconds. And the cost is very, very low. And then you can build triggers along the process. So stuff like that, tooling, is super important in the current climate. Then we see a scenario where we had last year, the year before, we had lots of funding, and we had perhaps slightly less critical in investors. And we see a situation now where we still have lots of funding. So if we look at pre-seed, seeds, and A rounds, that's where we have the majority of our clients. There's still lots of funding. Emblem, as I mentioned before, that's a new fund from 2023. Another fund I'll mention today is Dreamcraft. They're raising their second fund, and they haven't had any difficulties doing so. So we have less angels in the current market. There's still lots of funding, but we have more critical investors. They're asking more questions. Last year, they said growth and more growth and grow faster. And now they're talking about the path to profitability, not necessarily being profitable today or tomorrow, but is there a path to profitability? How's the monetization? Are we creating realistic plans? How we changing in terms of market expectations to adapt to a different market? As part of that, so around, I think 12, 13 years ago, 14 perhaps, 12, 13 years ago in Bay Area, before that, it was possible to get funding with no monetization, but based on perhaps an app or another software product that had 100,000 users. So that was enough to get funding, and no one really asked about monetization. And then at some point, again, 12, 13 years ago, I think, investors started expecting more. They said, we still buy into the part about not having any monetization plans, but now we need more users. So you started saying, hey, 1 million users, that's a new 100,000 users. You could still get funding for that without monetization, but now expectations were a lot higher. We needed more like 1 million users. And we're seeing a bit of the same trend today. So 200% growth is the new 100% growth, and then some of you will be saying, that's impossible. It's not impossible, but it's hard. So I think what we're seeing from investors and what I'm focusing on as an investor myself, that is that either you have very, very strong growth, and last year, some of the clients we were working with, they had perhaps 60% growth, and to be a VC case, you really needed around 100% growth. So that was the focus. Now you either need to move that needle, not necessarily to 200%, but above 100%, and probably a lot above 100%, or you need to have a very, very strong path towards profitability. Leading me to my next point, which is that commercial focus is more important than ever. And it will continue to be so until the market changes. And when the market will change, that's a good question. I mean, we have recession in some markets around Europe. Germany is a huge driver for the European economy. They're moving into recession. I'm not too concerned. I'll get back to that in a sec. But for the time being, we really have to focus a lot on commercial and still building the right product, but more focus on commercial than product in the current market. So something around how to build a startup scale up from a recruitment perspective. I considered using, if you know Lord of the Rings, I considered using something a bit more sinister here, like Frodo's journey through Mordor, but we chose something a bit more peaceful here. So my advice to startups and scale-ups is always to think in terms of funding rounds. And obviously that differs, but on average, we would say you have around 18 months between each funding round. So plan according to that. That means, what do we need to deliver? What did we promise investors in the early life cycle, in a pre-seed stage, for example? That's a lot about products. It's a lot about getting users and less about monetization. Once you come into a seed stage, that focus shifts more into commercial metrics. And when you hit an A round, you really need that product market fits, and you need all your metrics in place, because an A round is a growth round, which means that you'll with some changes on the way, but that's not the time to pivot. That's what you do at a pre-seed and a seed stage. When hiring, always start with your network, but be critical. A fallacy is hiring people that look a lot around like yourself. So avoid that. So start using your own network. But if you don't find the talent you need there, you really need to invest some more time, some more energy getting beyond that network. You also have to realize that looking at Portugal as an example, looking at Denmark as an example, there's a limit to the amount of talent. So you may also need talent that's not necessarily in Portugal or in Denmark or in Belgium, for example. Something around hiring smart and solving today's problems today and the problems of tomorrow another day. What I mean by that is that sometimes we speak to a startup and they say, hey, we need a very, very senior CSO or CRO, and we need someone who has gone from pre-seed to a C round, D round, and exited, and someone who has had a massive team. And often the advice we give them is, it's not the problem you're solving today. You have a very, very small commercial team, 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Perhaps you're in the phase where you're shifting from a founder sales-led model to a more professional, scalable sales model, and solve the problem you have today. So if the problem you have today, that's operational sales, then perhaps you need a head of sales. Perhaps you don't necessarily need a CSO. Perhaps you do need a CSO, and then you should hire that. But plan for now, and then tomorrow's problems, which comes into the next funding round, that's for another day. There's something to be said about internal talent acquisition and external recruiters, such as myself. The thing about recruitment is that it's hard. It's super, super hard. And one of the things that makes it hard is that it's binary. So either you do not hire someone or you hire someone. You can't half hire someone. And that means it's a lot like sales. And that means that working in talent acquisition, especially in a market like we have now, it's super tough. Because you need to find very, very senior people. You need to do it fast. You need to hire right. And that means that if you have an internal talent acquisition, then it might not last long. A lot of people in talent acquisition, they prefer to move on to HR, for example, which is more sometimes more strategic and less binary. External recruiters, they can, like everything else, be good or bad. So it's important to look into what you're hiring. If you're hiring a lot of people, then look at internal talent acquisition. If you're not hiring a lot of people, then sometimes it's smarter to use an external recruiter. And always be aware of costs. If you have an internal recruitment team, for example, of 4 people, and you hire 2 people per month, that's a very, very expensive model, and it might not make sense. On the other hand, if you're hiring a lot of people and you only use external recruiters, that might also be a high cost. Be aware of the tooling around it. Again, you need LinkedIn, you need an ATS, an applicant tracking system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So tooling is quite expensive. I don't know if you guys know this one. This guy, Bear Grylls, improvise, adapt, overcome. So that's a bit about the current market. So I think it's super important, the current market, to improvise, adapt, to overcome. So it's making a plan, sticking to it, but be prepared to change the plan, and also be tough. What I mean by that is that I'm looking into investing in a smaller startup, and they've had a VP sales for a year and a half, and he's not really selling anything. And for me, that's a major red flag. It's never a joy to lay people off, but they're betting the life and success of their startup as founders into a VP sales who a year and a half into the journey hasn't really sold anything. So make a plan, be tough. If it's a 6-month plan, then look at what you have achieved within the 6 months. And if it doesn't work, you really need to create a different plan, especially because in the current market, you'll have a shorter runway. It's going to be a bit more difficult to get funding, etc. So you can't afford to waste 12 months on something which is clearly not working. I don't know if you know the expression labor hoarding, but labor hoarding was what happened last year, the year before, especially. It was so difficult to hire people that, if you needed to hire 5 developers or five account execs, then you would hire 6 or 7. You would be concerned that you couldn't hire enough people, and as a result, sometimes you would hire people who perhaps were not talented or senior enough for the job you hired them for. And that's just a trend we're seeing currently. No one can afford that. Everywhere in Europe, whether it's Lisbon, it's Berlin, it's London, it's Copenhagen, it's Stockholm, it's Amsterdam. No one can afford to have part of the organization not being productive. So it's really, really important to look into your resources, make some tough decisions, see, is there, as I mentioned before, is there anything you can automate? Is there anything you can do differently to overcome, basically, because no one can afford to have an organization which is not efficient in the current market. Make smart decisions. There's a Chinese proverb which says, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. There's definitely a market in the current climate where if you build windmills, then you're prepared when the rest of the market is not. For when we see a more interesting market, it's also dangerous. So make some smart decisions, make qualified bets, in the current market. VCs are sometimes seen as a bit evil. They can be nice and can be evil. Mark Twain once said that a banker is a fellow who lends you his umbrella when the sun is shining, but once it back the minute it begins to rain. And that's kind of the way it is, and that's why some investors are a bit more critical in the current market. They get concerns if they can see that you're not hitting commercial metrics, if they can see something is not working. They get concerns if you don't make smart decisions, such as, you know, having the right organization. Perhaps you have 15 people today, but are they the right 15 people? Do you need to focus some headcounts from products or operations over to a commercial focus, for example? That's really top of mind for most investors right now. Then there's something around choosing the right investors for each stage of your life cycle. That's, you know, before the pre-seed stage, you sometimes have something called friends, family, and fools. So it's either someone, you know, your parents or your immediate family, they have to invest in you, and then there are also some fools who bet heavily on you, even though you haven't really built anything yet, and either they become rich. You know, this turns out to be an awesome investment, or they don't. Angels are more cautious in the current market, but there's something around, you know, is it, you know, are you focusing on a VC? So Emblem, for example, they're good in early stages. So smallest ticket size would be around 500k euros. So that could be at a pre-seed or seed stage, but they're probably not the best investor for now for an A round. There's also something around what they bring to the table. Do they bring sector-specific knowledge? Do they bring a network, for example? Because there is a distinction between smart money and just money. There's a Danish VC I mentioned before, Dreamcraft. They're called Dreamcraft because they believe in dreamers and crafters are necessary to build a startup. You need someone visionary, a dreamer, to build a startup, but you also need a crafter, someone who can actually build something. That's super important. And after investing in you as a startup and after onboarding you, then you get moved on to a platform team, and that platform team will help you with recruitment and people and culture and build operations and automated processes and commercial guidance, financial guidance, you know, how to manage your runway, etc., etc. And the less experienced you are as a founder, the more help you need. If you're already on your third startup with 2 successful exits behind you, then perhaps you need less smart money and more just money because you know what to do. Even though even the smartest people need some advice and some guidance sometimes. But if you're a first-time founder, I really can't stress enough how important it is to have some good and smart people around you. That's VCs, angels, it's the boards, it's advisors, etc. Someone like me who can advise you on recruitments, someone who can advise you on how to expand into another European or global market, for example, or someone who can advise you on how to build the best engineering team. And also there's something around chemistry, which is super important. Coming back to the banker who will lend you his umbrella if the sun is shining. I've never actually seen a startup do a successful scale up, a successful exit without challenges along the way. There will always be challenges. Sometimes it's financial crisis, or it's COVID, or it's monkeypox, or it's a recession, or it's something else. there's always some form of crisis looming around the corner. So even though I'm an optimist, and you should plan for success and not for failure, there's really something around getting in bed with someone where you just know that they'll be by your side, even though it will be hard sometimes. A bit of self-promotion. We have offices in Copenhagen, Antwerp, and Lisbon. Some of the companies we have recruited for across Europe. In Portugal, we built a couple of teams, and majority of the organization for Velcho last year, mostly in Lisbon, but also a bit across Portugal. If you have any questions, any thoughts, or if you need help building a team, you're more than welcome to reach out. And I think that was it for me. I'm just gonna check the chat here and see. All right. So, any questions? Any thoughts?
I will also remind the audience that we also going to have a panel where we're going to be open for questions. So if you want to do questions later, you're going to have another opportunity. And in the meantime, I'm going to thank you, Bjorn, and ask you to be around. We're going to go for our second speaker. Just to let the audience also know that James Paulo from Charlie just emailed me saying that he had, unfortunately, a last-minute unforeseen event and is not going to be able to be with us. So after that, I'm going to introduce José Leal e Silva from B Engineering. José is Executive Director and is going to be talking with us about tech candidates, before and now. José, thank you for being with us. I pass the word to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, first of all, and for the opportunity to be with you all here. And well, thank you, Bjorn, for your nice presentation. And it links directly with the topic I'm issuing now, I'm addressing, because you said something very interesting about the hoarding of the market and the candidates. And when suddenly all companies start hiring and they hire almost everyone. There's even a saying among some companies that they can say, well, if he can talk or if he can write, please go ahead and hire, even if he doesn't have the right skill. So this is why I'm going with my presentation. Let me just ask one thing. Is the sound okay? Is everything okay on your side? Listening correctly? Okay, great. Just to make sure of that, so I won't be speaking and no one will be listening. So this being said, I bring to you, it's kind of a personal point of view, because I think these talks should be more about that and sharing experiences more than a complete study about something, but bringing into the let's say, the academic world and bringing into the, I would say, the people in general, our personal experience in terms of companies and what we're feeling in the market, okay? I prepare a small presentation in order to make it easier to show my point of view. So I'll do the share with you. And then, of course, I'll be able for the debate session that will be afterwards, and we can talk about this. So let's talk about candidates then. And it's a transitional question across industries, I would say. So it doesn't matter if you work in IT or if you work in, I don't know, civil engineering or education or any other industry. You just talk more about this. And when it comes to IT, because it's a recent area, well, recent, common speaking, but it's an area that since it has been growing in the last years, there's a lack of candidates. But this happens in all other areas. And I see many people from civil engineering, for instance, complaining about the same thing. I want someone for plumbing, and I can't find the right person. So this being said, something very transversal, very, very direct everywhere. And I decided to take a look. So what happened to candidates? What did change, if anything, changed at all? So of course, I went through the lines of generations, let me see what's happening. And I'm not going to talk to you about different types of generations. Have you heard about this? My point is somewhere along this line. And I found some very interesting literature on this. So this is the greatest generation, this is the silent, and bear in mind please that the dates might change according to the country, to the continent. So there's not really a consensus about this. But as humans, we tend to group things in and label things, and within the same generations. So that's just us being humans. So if I'm the greatest, the silent, then the boomers, and then suddenly between Gen X, you find the millennials, and you hear lots of talks, especially about millennials. And of course, after them, Gen Z and Alpha and so on. And I was doing this, and I thought, well, I remember listening, looking at some studies about the millennials and how they were so hard to deal with. And started to think, well, some of us are in the line more or less here in these type of stalls. I keep finding people around this area and sometimes around this area. So what is it then about the generation? Why do you talk so much about it? So I decided, well, let me go a bit deeper into this. It has been written on this, and how does that affect the company? Because the bottom line, what we want to know is, how is this important for me as a company? And how is this important for me when I'm recruiting and when I'm building my business? Either it's a startup or a well-established company. It relies and depends on the people who work there, no matter what the business is. So I found a very interesting article. I don't know if some of you read it or not. It's in Time magazine. It's quite a good article about generations and all the important things about the generations. Then I started looking at a few topics that might affect the way we hire, because talking about candidates. If candidates, it means someone is applying for a job, and someone on the other side is, of course, looking to hire someone. So this is what we're looking for. And I found something interesting. So let's say, okay, so this very nice article based on studies and facts says, well, we have so many trophies. So and remember, this is just an example. This study is about the millennials. Okay, so I picked up this example and saying, well, this is a recent study, okay, and then you have 40% that believe they should be promoted every 2 years regardless of performance. I said, I've seen this happen. It happens in companies, and it is true. Of course, it has to do with the way we run up and we built up. So if you keep winning trophies and medals, and I even see that in school some days. Let's say you have a competition, and at the end, everyone gets the same medal. And there's a long debate about this. Is it good or is it bad? Because if everyone gets the same medal, why would the kid who was in last try to run faster next time to be in first if he has the same medal? Whereas if you have 3 medals, maybe if you're in fourth place, you think, okay, next time I'll try to run faster and I'll do some more sport. Doesn't matter, but you aim for something. And since we're human beings who aiming for goals. So this was one of the things that the article describes it. Well, this is, and the article describes it has a problem, okay? The problem is not, but just let's say we have to deal with this. Okay. More things that are very interesting about generations. So it's a generation convinced of its own greatness, and I like the way the sentence was built upon, because it says, 60% of millennials, if they found in a situation don't really know how to do it, how to solve it, just say, well, we'll be able to feel what's right. And once again, in the article, this was being said as a problem. And I said, well, is it a problem or not? Are they problem solvers then because they feel it's right, or they won't solve a problem because you're weak? It's not enough to feel something. You have to understand and know about it. Okay, so I kept reading, what else? And then I found something very interesting that came before the article. It explains something that happened before this generation. So that's why I showed you the timeline before. So in the 70s, there was this trend to improve success of people, of course, of kids. Everyone wants the success of their children. So they thought, well, we should improve self-esteem. And it's very interesting that you look at psychologists and this psychology professor, Professor Roy, he was saying that, well, it was years after, of course, saying, well, maybe we did honest mistake because they had been looking at the early findings. And then, of course, if you have better esteem, maybe you'll have better results, but they've learned that it's not something that it comes as something you can work on. Self-esteem is a result of something that was happened, your experiences, your troubles, maybe your difficulties, maybe something had to go longer your life. And one last thing, because we're talking about generations, like took out of the article to share with you. Well, it mentions a very interesting thing, which is, well, if I want to develop myself intellectually, and I would say in any other areas, you got to relate to other people. But do the millennials relate? Do we relate? Did the older generations relate? Or the next ones? No. We'll see into that. But it's interesting to think about that. In our whole history, we come across the impression that if you want to improve, well, you have to relate not only with your peers in terms of generation age, but as well with other people. And this is, well, I'll think about it and say, well, it's actually, or it's true in many areas of expertise. For instance, if I want to launch a company or startup, maybe I should relate with your, if you did that, maybe I should relate with people who failed, maybe I should relate with people who had success. That will make me better instead of just relating with people who want to create a company. Okay, makes sense. So I decided, well, let me dig a little bit into this. And so, is it just, and what do you talk about? No, well, wait a minute. You can find articles in different generations. For instance, I don't know, the problem of the millennials, the problem with the baby boomers. They were the problem, especially the American. This article was an American. They the ones who bankrupted the economy, and they're the actual problem. They're just dominated by feelings and not facts. And remind you, I'm talking about the boomers, which came to generations before the millennials. And say, well, this is very interesting because nowadays, we're looking at someone in their 20s and saying, well, they do what they feel instead of looking at facts. And so, well, someone was saying that about the generations in the 70s. It's quite interesting to see that the complaints, and let me put it in comma, and it's maybe we shouldn't see it as a complaint, but the way it's described, the way it's described, some of them are described the same along the years. So I say, well, there's no appreciation for social solidarity. And then there's someone with a microphone on. If you could please just check. Thank you. And they say, well, there should be an explanation. Of course, there should be an explanation. What has happened? You know, who did this? Well, and I just decided, well, does it really matter for us nowadays in a company and when you're hiring and relating with people? Does it really matter if we complain about the old generation, the next generation, or if we find out who's to blame for this, or who's to cheer for what they did and they achieved? Because in every generation, you of course see people who failed somehow and people who succeeded somehow. Then I started, thinking about this and looking through my childhood, looking through what I'm seeing today, looking through what I've heard from your parents, grandparents, and people I relate to, and I kept seeing, there's a constant here, like, well, young people don't work anymore. They just want to spend time on their iPhone, on their tablet, on their Android, whatever. And I say, wait a moment. I heard this sentence many years ago, and there were no mobile phones. So the problem that existed, someone with experience basically complaining about someone with less experience that they're not working. Well, where weren't they not? Because it's according to the standard of the person who is doing the observation. Maybe they're working different way. I don't know. Back in the days, or those were the days, because before was better than now. And mind you, as we get older, and this is a fact, as humankind, as we get older, we get more attached to the things we lived in the past, because we get more attached to telling stories, than to knowing more things, and you get more attached to staying at home instead of meeting new people. Okay? That's just basic human biology. Okay, of course there are exceptions, but if you go to a place where you have elderly people in their 80s, 90s, and so on, and you see what's the thing that they like to do the most, and they like to recall childhood and tell stories. So okay, this makes sense, but it's not about generations. Just we are like that. And then one more sense, older generation is lost, or even better, we know better because I have experience, and you haven't done this before. You're just a child. Does it make sense? Does it work like that? Because you can look the other way and you see, well, someone who's just is younger than us, has new ideas, different ways to approach things. And say, well, why are you just taking anything like that? And I believe some of you saw maybe a very, very old movie of Charles Chaplin. And he works in a factory and he keeps doing this to his parts because he's doing it at the end of the day. He keeps doing this all day. And that has to do with the industry at the time. We did, and we were built up and grown up to do repetitive things. Nowadays, we cannot do that. It changes in a year, things change. Not just technology, but the way we do it, the process, the company, the market changes. Björn talked something about that in terms of investors. I'm putting my money in this company now, but I have to assess it later on. Otherwise, if there's no sales rep, what am I doing here? And there's a lot of reasons for that, because things do change. Then again, who is younger and doing things right now, they might look at someone who is older generations. He doesn't know. He never did. We didn't even know what an iPhone was or Android. We didn't even have a mobile phone. So, but it was that way around too, right? It's interesting. You can do a quick test if you do one of the earlier I would say. If you put someone with 10, maybe 10, 12, more than that, and ask him, you know what this means? I'm doing this gesture. And I think it's pretty obvious that, I'm calling someone, it's a phone call. And I did that test with a few kids because I heard about it, so no, it's not possible. And I tried. So if you're going to call someone, or if you're going to tell them that you're calling them later in a gesture, how would you say it? Do it like this. I said, oh, here's a difference. Same thing, different way, because you put it like that and not like that. So what I'm going through here is that, maybe who's young would say, we know because we're old and things change. And I believe if all of us think a little bit about when we're younger, and I mean younger, because of course, if I look at when I was between 20 to 27, more or less, of course, I heard about advices of older people that say, they don't know, it's a different approach. I know better. And sometimes it's true. Just look at all the companies that were created in the past years with success. So times have changed, so I know better. So after this reflection, I said, every generation has problems, as you'd say, and of course has good things. And then everyone can complain about something, but does this affect companies? Does it matter if you have great team, lots of awards, great place to work? Does it matter if you have a certification? What does matter? How do I attract the right candidate, and how do I keep him in the company? And on the other way, do this, my candidate, my employee, my worker, my collaborator, whatever the name you want to give it, because it also changes all the time. How would he be, proud to work in that place for long years? Is it just, commitment? Is it in the generation has no commitment, or it has commitment? Is it in the project? Let me look at, something which is challenging, as I could say nowadays. By the way, not everyone is challenging, okay? There are lots of people who like steady things that their place that they can control. And their value is tremendous in some projects. In others, you need someone a bit different. Company reputation, is that what matters nowadays? It's salary. No, money is very important. People do stupid things for money. Or is it because, I just, things change once again, and I want to work remote. I don't want to go to the office. I don't want to meet people. I want to be here just doing my work. Or all of them, or none of them. well, I came to my personal conclusion that what really matters is that we focus on human behavior, because all the rest changes. All the environment changes, people, they change amongst themselves. And you would say, of course, but behavior also changes. Well, yes, it does. But once again, I try to dig a little bit into this and try to understand if there's something that can, prove in a fact or something like that, my empiric knowledge about this. And I came across an interesting thing about, firstly, I believe most of you are familiar with the 3 laws of Newton. Well, I found out that there's quite some interesting literature about the 3 laws of human behavior. And so, well, if you state it has a law, it means it should always happen, or almost always, anyway. If you look at the laws, well, it's not that bad. It actually does apply, First of all, what does it actually mean? Well, it means that it's like, if I'm doing something that I like and I'm comfortable with it, I tend to resist to getting out of it because I like it and I'm comfortable. It's the status quo, so that gives me fuel to remain here. And of course, if I'm forced to something I don't like, I get away. I don't want to get, and I reject. This is something pretty easy to understand. So once again, why is this important? Well, because if you want to attract someone to your company or retain someone in the company or a candidate, maybe it's important to understand what's the fuel for that person and what's the friction. And it doesn't mean that you only put fuel in, right? Friction is necessary also. A lot. So you have to balance both of them, but to just understand that this happens. And then talking about law number 2, which is very simple, of course, behavior changes within the person and within the environment. Very easy example of this. People are different, but we have a 9 to 6 schedule, right? Or 9 to 5, or wherever it may happen in your industry. We work by shifts, but there are people that actually work better in the morning and people who work better in the afternoon, and it's biological, it's physical, it's not something that I choose to be like that. You're not choosing, just you are like that. We kind of compensate it. So, well, he's a good worker, he works, all the time the same. It's not true. He's good at compensating and he leverages his performance during the day, because that's how you are. And you think about yourself, you'd say, well, it's true. Maybe even in college, would I get up in the morning to study, or would I stay late studying because it worked better? So people are different, and the environment which they put in, of course, is different, because depending on the person and company, once again, we're talking about companies, we're talking about different things, we're talking about candidates. If it's someone, good at their hard skill, but they won't fit into your company environment, well, it's normal that there will be a friction and that you will want to leave. It's just about understanding this. That's the key issue. Then, of course, there's consequence. Goal number 3, sometimes try to get, good measures. Let's say, funny example. Let's say you get to the end of the year and you say, well, it's been a very good year. We launched new areas. Everyone is happy, and you got your sales team and your human resources department team, and whatever area you have, and you say, well, as a token of recognition, here's a bottle of wine. And maybe, just maybe, there'll be someone saying, well, I don't drink wine. It's against my religion. And then there's someone else saying the same thing. Is, why are you offering wine? You want us to be, alcoholics? Wait a minute, I just wanted, to appreciate. It's a token of appreciation, or something else different. Or let's say you would say you can work remote. From now on, you only have to come to the office once a week. And you think, very good measure. Is it? What if most of your employees say, well, I miss coming to the office and I don't have the conditions to work at home and I cannot do it. And if I don't relate to people, I'll start, in simple terms, losing my mind. So what I mean is that there are consequences, and there'll always be consequences, and there'll always be unintended, right? Most of them, when you do a measure that we think will be good, if you think will be good, the consequences, if it's not, We didn't intend that, of course, because we're running a company or a department and want the success of it. Or let's say you're posting something as a recruiter and you say, okay, this will give me more candidates. And then suddenly someone interprets the post in a different way, and then the company image is at stake. This can happen. It's just unintended consequences or trade-offs you have to make sometimes. Like the example in the presentation before. So I hire a lot of people because I need, but then what's the trade-off? Well, the trade-off is that when the market contracts, I have to do all the tough decisions. Yes, I have to lay off some people because otherwise the company won't stay there. That's the trade-off between things that have to happen. And why is this important when you're hiring? And why is this important when you think about candidates? And there were, those were the days with good candidates. Now there are not good candidates, or only new people are good candidates. Someone over 50 is not a good candidate. These are just, prejudice and preconceptions based on, some experience that you might have in the past. It might be true or it might not be true. And this is where I wanted to bring with you and to wrap up what I was presenting and the things that, well, how do I deal with this thing? How do I deal with this dichotomy between what happened before, what's happening now, and how I prepare myself for the future? Well, my humble suggestion would be, well, look at history and how I've been, companies and humankind dealing with this. For instance, first of it, you need to be aware that yes, humans will change a long time. That's why wrap them up in generations. It's normal to continue to happen. You have some generations that in a global way are more skilled in some things and less skilled in other things, or because the environment changed. Maybe because of that. If you have a war, maybe you're skilled, overcoming wars, and maybe you're more resilient. But maybe you're not, I don't know, as emotionally aware. Or in the other sense, there's no war, everything's good economy. Maybe, you have time to understand people, their feelings, but if something happens, you're not used to it because you're not used to the frustration. Depends on the environment. So first thing, you have to be aware that, yes, we do change. That's how it is. Okay? The environment also changes. We're in a good year, and then next year we're in a bad year, or in the middle of the year, suddenly we realize that, wait a minute, I have to contract. I'm hiring, and I cannot. Or I stop hiring, and then I realize, oh my God, I have so many things to deliver. I need to hire suddenly. Okay? And then I need to do it in a way that it's not possible in the market. So there's a balance that has to be made here, and the continuous, I would say, survey and analysis on what's happening. And then again, bear in mind one thing that I said before, and which I personally believe it's very, very, very true. Old and new is better than old and old. And of course, old and new is also better than new and new. And what I mean with this is that when it comes to teams and candidates and people in the company and employees and collaborators and managers and I don't know, and whoever you want to put together, if they're humans, different experiences and mixed experiences usually bring to a better path. They also bring conflict. It's not a problem if you're aware of that, okay? But usually brings to a better path. So what I mean by this is that if I only hire people from, let's say, the generation which is booming now, I'll have their understanding of the way things are now. But I won't have the understanding of the basis and maybe the resilience of how they were before. On the other hand, if I only hire someone from the generation before mine or my generation, because I know that my generation is the best one, and I'm focused on that, I have a problem because I don't know what's happening. And when I realize the company has been bankrupt because someone had a better idea and someone adapts, and you didn't because you didn't see it coming because you're looking to the past. How do I mix these two? Well, first of it, in my point of view, you teach someone, so you have the experience of someone who has already been doing that, and I'm doing the very either if you're hiring or if you're in the company, okay? But if you're hiring, well, you teach the recruiter by a recruiter who has been there before, and if you're hiring, you teach the skills. So it doesn't matter what the job or the position. But my point of view is that you teach and then you learn, and you learn with who? You learn with the person who just taught. because they'll bring a new perspective. Of course, you can learn so that you can teach. And by this, I mean, the person who is just entering has to know that, well, before you give your perspective and you want to change things, understand where you are, learn with the old people who are there, and then bring your perspective. That's when it's valuable. Because if you do it the other way around, either you create your own company and your visionary works, or it doesn't work because you didn't have the experience of past failures or past successes. So in my opinion, is just if you mix them both and you kind of say, well, you're my old guy, you're very good, right? You're the best. So teach these guys to be the best. And when you've done that, learn from them. And the new guy say, well, you're so good, your potential is great, right? Well, first of all, learn with the old guy. Understand how it works. Then give me your potential so it can be maximized. And why? Well, because we are different, we keep changing. And bear in mind that someone who is very aligned with the organization today might not be tomorrow, and the other way around also is true. You get someone, new candidate who comes into a company and it doesn't work, and there's oral arguments, and then suddenly maybe 6 months after that, maybe he's your strongest defender of the company, someone who just got the culture within. This happens. The other way around also happens. Someone who's in the company for maybe a few years and sons as well, I don't feel we're going the right way. Why? Well, because people change, environment changes. We cannot pretend it doesn't exist. We can only deal with it and be aware. So I would say that it's not a script, it's not software or hardware or industry. It's about being aware, knowing that it exists, and having, the consciousness that, well, in order to solve this in the future, I need to know that it exists. So first of all, this is the most important thing. So when it comes to candidates from then and now and what happened before, what's happening now, my greatest suggestions would be aware, especially about these small things, small topics, which are based in facts, but they're empiric if you look into it. And I believe we'll be building stronger teams, attracting the right candidates, and making them happy because they will be staying on the company that gives them fuel. And I'll say this is it, if I'm not mistaken. Well, this is it. Thank you for listening, for being there. And well, I'm open for questions, for I don't know, for critics, whatever.
Well, if you agree, Jose, we can move on to the discussion panel, and we'll have there some questions. Jose, thank you for your talk.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to introduce now Ricardo Mariano. Ricardo Mariano is the CEO of Grupo Timing. Ricardo, I'm going to pass the word to you now. Thank you for being here with us as well.
Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks for the invitation, Antonio and Juan, and congratulations. And this kind of situations are amazing, and it is very nice for everyone. Jose and Björn, thanks again. Let's talk a bit more. And I have some questions to do. Björn, where are you? Jose, you are listening?
Yes, I am here.
Yes, right. And Björn, we need to wait a bit for Björn, but Jose, tell me a bit more about your what kind of points, in your opinion, you can in other way, what kind of advices can you do for the young entrepreneurs who are listening now, when they are starting. Tell me 3 main points to do in this kind of situations.
Let me see this, and bear in mind that my answer will probably change in months or so.
Just 3.
The environment changes.
It's possible.
Okay? So just 3. First of all, if you believe in what you're doing, don't give up. If you believe in what you're doing, don't give up, right? Because of course, you have to have a way of believing it. You have to look at it and say, okay, this is a good project. I have sales. I can, build a company upon this. This is believing. It's not just a matter of faith, okay? I think it will be okay. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about proper belief. I've looked at things, looked at the market, said, this can be done. Okay? There's a way for this, and I can do it. This is believing. Right? And if you believe it, well, do it. Go ahead. Don't give up. Right? Second one, please understand that there might come a time that you have to stop believing. If you're looking at entrepreneurs, one of the most important things, I believe, would be it's better to start 10 things and one of them will be your greatest success in your life than to start just one, it will be failure. Failure comes along. There's no problem with it.
Of course.
I have a belief, you look at things, but then somewhere along the way, the environment changed. I don't know, you didn't get the right people, you were wrong, the market didn't go with you, maybe you were too early or too late, it doesn't matter. Just be aware that it might come a time where I have to stop believing in this and find my best. Right. So first one, second one, and you asked me for third one, right? So I would say the third one is bear in mind that you are a visionary, you trust yourself, but you don't know everything. So yes, learn from the others. Humbleness, it's a very important characteristic, and it has a balance with confidence. Right? I believe I'm good, I know what I'm doing. But yes, listen to the other people, really listen to them, because if they're saying something based on their experience, it has a point and it might be very useful to you. So instead of saying, well, you're not right, try to listen to it, be open, understand how that information can be helpful in your project, in your company, in what you're trying to launch into the market. So I'd say keep this 3, at least in my point of view at this time, with this environment, in this day, this will be my 3 advices.
For sure, you have a lot of advices. Maybe we can do a list with 100 advices, and they are not
just 3. But 3 is good. Okay. Our brain doesn't process 100.
Yeah, thanks. Another question, Jose. What was the biggest challenge you had in the last years, and how did you solve it? Tell us something different. Maybe some secret.
Secret. There's no secret. You just have to walk with it, because it's the experience.
For sure, you had a lot of challenges.
Sometimes it's not the knowledge, right? And there are challenges that you have to go through them. Even if you're seeing it, if you don't go through it, the experience is not required. So this being said, I wouldn't say the biggest, because it's hard to get the biggest, but good challenge which can be different. Well, let me tell you one that happened 10 years ago when we decided to launch Speed in Portugal. I was in group, I had a unit director, and I had a good team behind me, and said, well, let's start something. And it was within the group, which is good. I had some confidence, but you start from scratch. And yes. What is the challenge here? The challenge is that you have to leave what you are doing in terms of management, and you have to go back to where you started, and go back to calling clients, and go back to interviewing people, and go back to the basis almost. And this is one of the very, very big challenge, I believe. And if it happens to someone, or if it's there, it's because it's meant to be done, right? There's a saying about this. I don't remember how it's done, but it's something about if the road presents itself to you because you're ready to drive through it. So if you face yourself through a challenge and you think you can do it, or just do it, because what's the worst thing that can happen? You fail. So what? We just forget that when we were kids, we failed every day. You know, we got up and we stumbled. If you tried to write and you couldn't write and it was wrong, and you tried to talk and the word was wrong, and so what? We kept on doing it. That's how we learn. That's human being. You're not machines. We cannot be programmed and done. Even AI, it learns by its mistakes. So I would say the biggest challenge was that, because it made me come back to the basics and to something that I didn't do in a long time.
Very nice. Thanks, José, for the confidence. I listen a lot of entrepreneurs and businessmen and women, and sometimes the conversations are about the age, because when we are talked about startups, we can see a lot of young people, young boys and girls doing some projects and their dreams, of course. But in my opinion, to do something, the age, it's not the most important point. We can have 20, 30, 40 or 50 or more. We have everyone saw the McDonald's movie, the McDonald's story, and we saw a guy with 55 years old or something, starting one of the biggest brands in the world. And my question for you, José, is can older people start new businesses with the same confidence? Sometimes they tell me maybe it's too late. Maybe they don't have the same conditions comparing with the other ones. What's your opinion about that?
I think it's not about confidence. So my opinion is that, yes, of course, Ken is not on the edge, but the key issue is not about confidence to start in something, it's about responsibility. Because when you're young, it's, well, I'll just spend 25 hours working, well, let's say 23, I may sleep one, doesn't matter. I have no one to take care, to be accountable for. So my risk is less. And since, well, I'm not earning money, so I'm still not earning money, there's no problem. When you get older, usually it becomes an overhead of responsibility. You either have kids or have family, or whatever responsibility you have, and you're probably earning money to pay something. So let's say I'll just do something because I'm very confident. So you quit your job and go and do it. Yes, great. Can I spend 6 years or 6 months? Let's say at least I would say a year, but let's just do it 6 months. With no pay, no income, and no time for anyone and no availability. So it's not about confidence, it's about responsibility that you have usually. Yeah. And which is the main key issue? It's usually the people this age who have the confidence to do it, they have the responsibility, because